guys, so I have Dana Boys with me. This is my sister-in-law, and she's all the way in Pennsylvania. So most of you are viewing in Virginia, but we do have a couple people that watch in other states. So Dana, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi. So I am Dana Boys. Amanda and I are sister-in-laws, and I've been married to my husband, Brandon, who is Amanda's husband's brother. So confusing to me for some reason. For almost 10 years now. So they just celebrated their 10-year anniversary in June, and we're celebrating ours in August. We have 3 kids, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and my youngest daughter, Elise, was born at the end of March, and she's 3 months old now. I work for a church. I'm administrative director and marketing coordinator, and do kinds of little odds and ends jobs all over the place as well. So that's a little bit.
Good. Okay, awesome. So Dana is going to talk a little bit about just kind of her experience. So she gave birth obviously 3 months ago, she said, which was in March, which is during the pandemic. And so she's going to just talk about like how that was in the beginning, what she felt. So why don't you kind of just talk about like from the beginning, like knowing, oh my goodness, this is about to happen.
Yeah, so we went into like quarantine lockdown about a week and a half before my due date. So that was like kind of weird and strange. And, there were all kinds of things on social media and, through the news channels just about this coronavirus and kind of like a lot of scary things that, being ginormously huge and about to pop, I'm like, okay. Like, how do we navigate through this? And it was like things were changing like every second in terms of like what the protocol was for, how many people you can have in the hospital with you. And then there were news reports like in New York where like your husband couldn't even be in the room with you when you delivered. And like that freaked me out because I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. That's not gonna fly. So there was like a lot of, I think, initial like anxiety and fear when this all started happening because there were so many unknowns.
Yeah.
And, every time I had an appointment or a checkup, and I had some complications with this pregnancy in terms of like I had gestational diabetes. And so I had to do like a weekly stress test twice a week. So I was having to go, somewhere to do that. And it was just, there was a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so there was just a lot of anxiety and fear kind of at the forefront. I did, have some panic attacks because I was like freaked out. And so I kind of just had to shut off the news and, not go on social media for a hot second because it was just triggering things within me that I knew once you go down the rabbit hole, it's like your mind just keeps reeling. Like I would be up at like 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, just like my brain going through all like the what if scenarios. And I think it's easy to go to the what ifs. And those are like the uncertain things that we don't know about. There's just so many uncertainties. So that was kind of where I started.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, when this pandemic hit, it was like, okay, now what?
Right, that's exactly what I was about to say. Now what do I do? So, okay, so now fast forward, like you are about ready to give birth. So you maybe share like what kind of things did you do to prepare even for that specific piece of just like going to the hospital? Did you have, well, maybe even just answer this, like, did you have fears about like you getting COVID or even your newborn getting COVID? Like, what were some of those thoughts? And then how did you just like keep them away? What kinds of things did you do?
Yeah. So, there was a lot of having to release and let go and lay down of all the things that I had envisioned and planned. You know, I'm a planner. You and we're planners. So, you know, I had this plan in my head of what, you know, this delivery was going to be like, and, you know, postpartum and my maternity leave. And I had all these thoughts of how everything was going to go. And I just kind of had to like let that fly out the window and release that. And that was hard. That was really hard. And it was something that I had to grieve too, because as things were changing on the fly, like the two things that I really grieved hard were, we couldn't have our doula with us, which she had, you know, been with us for our first two deliveries of our first two kids. And the same thing with our doctor. You know, our doctor had been there for the first two deliveries of our first two kids, and she was put on furlough the week before I went in, you know, was going into labor. So those two, I really grieved hard. But I found a lot of peace in, and I struggled to find peace. Let me just put that out there. It was not an easy thing to come by. It was something that I sought out because I knew if I did not have peace going into delivering this baby, like it was going to overwhelm me. And I didn't want that. I didn't want it for me. I didn't want it for my husband. I didn't want it for our new daughter. And so I started being very intentional about being still and being quiet, and entering into a very, you know, quiet meditative state where I would just listen. I would just be still and listen for Jesus. And it's a discipline that I've been learning over the past couple of years. And I really, really found so much value in that, especially in this time where, you know, the more often I did it, the easier it was to enter into that space. And when you enter into that space, the easier it is to hear his voice because you recognize his voice more readily and more easily. I listen to a lot of worship music, specifically the song It Is Well. I started playing that on my guitar and singing it every single day prior to having my daughter. And I played it and sang it every day of this quarantine. And it's so sweet because when she's like really upset, I just pull out my guitar and start singing it, and she just instantly like locks in, and like this peace like washes over her, and it is like the sweetest thing.
I was going to ask you, does she like kind of recognize it? That's really cool.
She does, and it brings peace to my heart because like now the season we're in is like, you know, we're still home, we're not really going out. And it can get a little chaotic around here and a little overwhelming. And when that starts happening, I just pull out my guitar and start singing that song. Because I just like, it's like a proclamation, like it is well. And there's been days like I haven't been able to actually sing the words because it didn't feel like things were well, but still knowing in my spirit that that is the truth. And then that's, you know, the thing that I want to stand on and that I want to proclaim over myself, over my family, or my kids, my marriage, my relationships, like it is well. And even when it doesn't feel like it, like God is still with us and he's still there and he never leaves us. He's given us everything that we need. And, you know, he's always by our side and he works for our good. And, you know, I think another powerful thing is just, I started proclaiming the promises that I knew to be true. So like I said, you know, there were so many uncertainties in that time where like things were just changing constantly. And like, there were all the what ifs. And instead of focusing on all the uncertainties, I started shifting my perspective and my focus onto the things I knew to be certain. And that is that God is my rock. He's my redeemer. He's my healer. He's my comforter, my provider, my joy, my strength, my peace. Like those are the things that I knew to be true and knew to be certain. And when all the other certainties start kind of coming in the mind and start kind of making me feel like, oh my goodness, like how are we going to do this? It was like this thing shifted where I'm like, no, like these are the things I know to be true and know to be certain, and therefore I don't have to fear. And, you know, I'm not going to say that little thing in the back of my head isn't still there, you know, with a newborn with a stinking virus, you know, it's like, yeah, you're going to have that concern because studies say, yeah, okay, kids are,
Less acceptable.
most kids are, asymptomatic and, don't contract it or whatnot. Okay, well, that's all well and good. But when you're holding this tiny little newborn whose immune system hasn't had a chance to develop yet, you're like, you want to just not take them anywhere or be exposed to anything. So, my husband and I are very limited in terms of going out and interacting with people. So anytime we go to the grocery store or go to a doctor's appointment, there's always that thing in the back of your mind, and it's just proclaiming God's peace and, doing what you can in order to stay healthy. So it's, nourishing your body with good food, exercising, being active, and, being emotionally and mentally healthy as well. Like all those things, I believe, work in tandem with each other. And when one thing's out of alignment, kind of makes everything else wacky. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you get to the hospital. How was that? Like, was it what I feel like for me, it would be surreal. Like, I mean, basically you had to wear a mask, right? Like everybody how was all of that?
So the first thing when we got there, so I was scheduled to be induced.
Mm-hmm.
So we had like an appointment, to come in. So we come in and we're like unloading all of our stuff. And there's like there's like 5 or 6 people at the door in the lobby. And they're all like, what are you here for? Are you in labor? And I'm like, well, I'm scheduled to be induced. So they're like, okay, well, we have to take your temperature and like, do all this stuff. So they take our temperature and, and then Brandon has to go put the car away. And then we go up and at that point they hadn't been like, I don't know, I didn't feel like they were like too insane, but like there were restrictions in terms of like we couldn't leave our labor and delivery room. That was kind of hard for me because I like to walk the halls and, get things moving in that way. But so we're in our room, walking around the room, and had a little dance party at one point, trying to, make things happen. But like anytime anyone came in, we had to put our masks on. But the team at the hospital where we were at, they were phenomenal. And, I look back and I know, having to had release all the other things that were changing, like I knew God was going before us and he had it. He was like, it's all good. I knew when she was going to be born. I knew this was going to happen. Like, I'm with you. Yeah. So I found a lot of peace in that. And the other piece was like, we couldn't have any visitors after she was born. So we're in the maternity ward. And I really thought I was going to be really sad about that. But honestly, it was really sweet because we got a lot of uninterrupted rest. And we had a lot of very sweet, intimate moments, as a husband and a wife and with our newborn daughter. I really had wanted our other 2 kids to be able to come to the hospital to meet her. But, thinking about it, I'm like, they're 5 and 3. They probably wouldn't even remember coming, so I let that go. I was like, it's okay.
That's good though, because even just what you said about letting go, I mean, what I really am hearing a lot is that, like, I can see how what you've experienced is specific to being pregnant and giving birth, but how relevant is that to anything, anything that we go through, that there's a change of our plans. I mean, I used to be terrible. Like, if I didn't get my way or if it changed the plan, I would get crazy. I would get mad, stomp my feet, like literally stomp my feet. And now I have found that rhythm of, like if there's something that's completely out of your control, you have to either go with the flow and go with the change, or it's you're going to be fighting it, and it's true for you. Like, there was nothing that you could do. Like, you couldn't sneak your doula in your bag. I mean, that would have been awesome. But that's just not what would happen. So it's like, you have to find that way. And I know that you did. Like, I think that that's awesome that you were able to say, this is what I want. This is the plan that I have. But I mean, we all have heard the verse, Jeremiah 29:11. God knows the plans that he has for us, plans to prosper us and not to harm us, to give us a hope and a future. And that right there is exactly what he did. He was like, sorry, this is my plan, and I'm growing you and I'm helping you change. And it's amazing to watch. Like, I mean, even for me, like, I know I didn't experience giving birth during a pandemic, but I can only imagine those feelings, like the fear, the anxiety, the frustration, the anger, the unknown, So I think that you've handled it very well. And even if there were moments where you didn't, like, overall, that's what it sounds like. So what, after you had her and, you guys get back home, what do you feel like has kind of kept you grounded during even just the quarantine and stuff like that? Because, we know that when we're isolated, sometimes that isn't good for us. So why don't you even just talk about that for people that, because I want people to know that this is not just for like a pregnant woman, like I have a couple pregnant, friends that I think would really benefit from hearing this, but I also know that this isn't just for pregnant women, so why don't you just kind of talk about just how it has been, dealing with isolation, and also, how this can go for people that, aren't in the same exact journey.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody on some level is, having a hard time right now. Whether you're home with a bunch of kids or you're by yourself, like everybody's journeying through this pandemic in their own way, and they're grieving in their own way. So I think for me personally, one of the things that's really helped is, being very intentional about connecting with a few close friends on a very regular basis, where, we use a Marco Polo app to send, videos to each other. And, we do that periodically with our family too, and text messages with our family, but just really, I have two friends in particular that I went to college with, and we've reconnected over the pandemic because of this Marco Polo app, just sending back and forth things, updates on life, and just praying over each other, and, sharing things with each other. And that really has gotten me through a lot. And then there's been a few other people in my life I've connected with. I wish I could see them in person, but I am super thankful for technology, like being able to, get on and see somebody's face, on a video chat is really a beautiful thing. Like, of course, I would rather be sitting in your living room talking to you right now. But the fact that we're still able to connect in this way is a huge blessing. Another thing that really helped me was every day when I journal, I write out 3 things that I'm thankful for. Kind of helps me shift the focus off of myself.
Yeah. And
I started making like homemade cards that are kind of just like silly and dumb, but most of them are like bad dad jokes. But they crack me up, and apparently they crack other people up. So like that just brings me joy, and again shifts the focus off of myself.
Yeah.
And sort of outlet. So anytime I think you can kind of shift the focus off of you and onto others, I think really helps, because I think also that's kind of what Jesus did too. He was constantly serving other people, and it wasn't about him. It wasn't about him. Like, he was constantly about other people. And I think that's a good model for us to have. And that doesn't mean you can't have bad days and, be miserable on the couch for like watching Netflix all day for a day, but don't live there. Like, it's okay to have that moment. It's okay. Like, you have permission to have that moment and to lock yourself in a closet and cry. And yes, I have done that.
Yeah.
And it's okay, but don't live there. Like, that's where the enemy wants us to live. He wants us to live in our sadness and in our despair and in our anxiety, because he knows, like, once he gets us hooked into that, it's a spiral, and it's easy to stay there. So it's like, have your moment, but remember who you are,
Yeah.
remember who you belong to, and remind the enemy who you belong to. And in that process, you remind yourself, and then you're fighting the battle. You're a warrior. We're all warriors. And I think just sometimes we forget it. And big part for me in terms of like spiritual warfare against anxiety and that kind of stuff, when all the overwhelming feelings start happening, is to speak stuff out loud into the air, is to just proclaim God's promises, proclaim the truth of who I know I am because I am his, and who, identity, just speaking those things out into the air really, I think is a very powerful weapon, because it's prayer, and it's also worship, and it's also, you strengthening yourself from within. Like, I know who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I'm going to overcome this and get through this because I belong to him.
That's right. That's good. That's very good. I expect for people to be taking notes, because these are very good points that you're making. So let me ask you this. During labor, like, I know for me, both of my births, I played worship music. Is there something that you do like that during birth?
Yeah. So I had, a worship playlist, for my labor, that we had going on, and I had some upbeat stuff, this is when we had our little dance party, and I had more like soothing, calming stuff. And then I also had, some like picture frames that I had brought with me, that I had put, some like, verses, some promises that God had given me regarding our daughter, regarding, reminding myself who I am from promises he's given me. And we just put those around the room. So, as I was walking around the room, I would like focus in on one of those frames and just like repeat that thing over and over again, like while I'm having contractions. And that was super helpful for me, because it was like, these things that I know are already true and they're in my heart. But that's like that reminder when you're in the middle of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Like,
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. I've heard of somebody else doing that before, like either affirmations or a Bible verse. That is really, really good. It's very, very encouraging. Yeah, I like that a lot. So what do you feel like, this was Brian's question, by the way. What do you feel like has been like a couple of positive things? Like, I think it's easy for us to automatically go like, we were in quarantine, and, kind of, even though we shift back to like how you found peace and all of that, but what do you feel like are some of the positive things that, or even, I mean, obviously the birth of your daughter is like the biggest piece, but what do you think are some things that really have been good during this time?
Man, I don't think we are ever again in our entire lives going to get a season like this where we have so much time to spend with the people that are closest to us and that we love. I just look at my kids and I know like they're not going to be this young for very long. And so I really, there have been some tough days, okay, but I have just been enjoying the time together so much, and just their growth and their personalities, the hilarity that ensues, in the conversations. It's just so sweet. And that we're all home together for this amount of time. It can get like mundane sometimes, because like you kind of feel like you're in this vortex or like this twilight zone or something. Like, what day is it? Like, I just want to thank you for this interview today, because it reminded me that I needed to take a shower, because it's been like, I don't know how many days since that happened. So. But there's just been so many sweet moments. Like, I truly am thankful. And I know this has been a lot harder for a lot of other people than it is for me. So I really can't complain, because I know there are people who are journeying through grief because, their spouse died last year, or, people who don't have any family close by that they can see. I know a lot of people are really struggling, and it just, my heart hurts for them, but it makes me that much more thankful for what I do have.
Yeah.
Because they, you know, I think you can always say like somebody's always going to have it worse than you. You know, we're really, really blessed in this country, and in, you know, in our families.
Absolutely.
Just with, you know, everything going on in our country right now, it's makes you really consider and think about the things that you hold close and that you value.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, for you specifically, because you're married and you were giving birth and your husband was able to be there, you know, speaking to people that have either are in the same situation as you, like they're about to give birth like next week, and they also have a husband or, you know, a friend, a close friend or something like that. What role do you feel like, I mean, I know for you, just because I've talked with you, like how important that is to have at least like one person that is like your go-to. So talk a little bit about Brandon and just how he's been like, I mean, I could probably cry just because I know it's not just you stepping up and changing and changing with the plan. It's another person too.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to put into words because he really was such a strong rock and support for me during that time, especially when I would be, and I started to panic, you know, he was the one who calmed me down and was like, just breathe, you know, let's pray. He would pray over me and really helped me calm down. And, you know, I was actually more concerned about him being confined to a room than myself because he can't sit still. The man just is constantly moving around, but he was phenomenal. And I think this being our third child, I think if this would have been our first child and this happened, it would have been a lot different. But
Yeah.
because our third child, and, you know, we had gone through this 2 other times, he kind of knew what to expect in terms of how labor works. And he had kind of been trained by our doula the previous 2 times. But I think it's important for a husband to go into this, like knowing what their role is. And that's, you know, you just support your wife. You just be there, like, just, you know, lean over the bed with her, hold her hand, tell her, just give her affirmation. Like, you're doing great. You're doing an awesome job. I'm so proud of you. Like, those are the only things that women in labor need to hear. Like, you know, because we're in a whole nother world, and like our minds are in a whole different place, and it gets intense with, you know, real fast. So
Sure does.
like, he was great. There aren't really words because he was, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, you know, for people who even right now, like in a different position of just, I'm not pregnant, I'm not married, I'm single, and I'm feeling isolated at home, you know, I think this is the perfect opportunity to, I mean, I've shared this before, like I've had to pray sometimes for friendships, you know, like sometimes friendships just don't come easily, not necessarily just to me, but in general, like, and specifically with being in quarantine for a couple of months, like it's not easy to see friends or to make friends. And so there's been several times where I've had to pray, like, Lord, please just bring me some friends, you know, bring me some people that will help encourage me and that I can encourage them. And I think that this is one of those times where you can just see the fruit of that, where your husband is your friend and he's your best friend, and you're able to spend that time in him helping you, you helping him, and having friends that you can say, hey, like even how you were talking about with Marco Polo, praying for each other. I think right now that is one of the perfect things that we can do, is just say, hey guys, like this is what I'm going through today. I need some prayer, or not even saying what you're going through. Like sometimes we don't even have to do that. Just saying, I'm having a bad day. I mean, that happened to me probably so it was sometime this week. It was either Monday or Tuesday. I just had to go outside, and I sat on the porch and just like read my devotion. I like scrolled on Instagram for a second. I ended up talking on the phone, and it was like, I just have to take a mental break. And sometimes it's awesome when you can take that little mental break and know that someone is praying for you, you know? So, let me see if there's any other things I want to ask you. So I think that's all of my questions. What else, is there anything else that you kind of feel like you want to add? Maybe just like a overall, you know, kind of one big statement to kind of sum up what you've thought through this whole thing?
Yeah, I think, the question of like, why, why now? Like, why is this happening? And, who knows how long we're going to be here, because it could be another year. Like, who knows? And it's just that there's so many, like, the unknowns and the uncertainties and the whys and the what ifs and all the things that like run through our heads. And I just like, the biggest thing that I would encourage is like, trust in the certainties that you know to be true. And that is found in the Word of God. It is found in spending that still quiet time with him. Like, be still and know that I am God. Like, God invites us into stillness in order to know him. And so the more we're able to pause, and there's time to pause right now.
Right.
So the more we're able to pause and be still with him, the more we come to know him. And the more we come to know him, the more we can be like him.
Yeah. You know, that's really good that you were even saying that. And I know it was God, because my devotion this morning was on being still. Yeah. And it was really neat because I don't remember the verse, if it was directly the one that you just said or not, but one thing that the book is called Strong, and I'm pretty sure it's Lisa Bevere. It's a devotional. And she said, for a little while, like when you go to bed, lay down and exactly what you're saying, be still before God. And it's really cool because sometimes we think that being still is like stopping, and being still is moving forward, but in a way that you're not rushing things. And, Brian and I have experienced that, where like God was telling us to be still, but he wasn't telling us to stop. And I think that's one of the kind of misconceptions with being still. You think, oh, I'm being still. But no, like you can't stop. You still have to go after or, spend time with God. But being still, and one of the examples that she had said, I think I've kind of said it, but she said, for the next week or so, lay down in your bed at night before you go to bed and just be still. Like a lot of times we ask God for things. And I think that's even just a point of what you were saying about taking the focus off of ourselves and onto other people, like how Jesus served others. And in this instance, she was saying, like, don't pray, God, can I have this? Or, I need this or whatever. Just sitting there and just saying nothing. And then just like what you said, the more you are still, the more you truly start hearing that voice of God. So I think that was really definitely a word for people, because it was from you and for me directly from God. So I think that was awesome. Well, I had a lot of fun, and I'm glad I got to see your face today. Hopefully we'll be up visiting in a couple weeks. So thank you for joining. Wait, what? Huh?
For you guys to meet Ali.
Oh, I know. We haven't met her yet. Our little niece. We're going to meet her soon. So thank you for coming on. And I love you and proud of you. All right. Well, I will talk to you soon.
Okay.